Hi there, and thanks for joining us on CTV News Channel. I'm Carolyn Jarvis. Canada's Western premiers are meeting in Alberta today, with the gathering overshadowed by two issues: the separation referendum in Alberta and tensions over a proposed pipeline to the BC coast. The premiers are set to hold 2 days of discussions in Kananaskis. Last week, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith announced that a question about independence will be added to the October 19th referendum. That question will ask Albertans if they want to remain in Canada or have the province begin the process of holding a legally binding referendum on separation. Speaking today, Prime Minister Mark Carney had this to say to people considering voting for separation.
That is a very dangerous bluff. That is a very dangerous bluff. I saw firsthand what happened in the United Kingdom when the view was vote for this, it'll be soft, and then we'll negotiate, etc. And they ended up, and they're still 10 years later trying to undo what people didn't think they were voting for, but what they ended up having.
BC Premier David Eby and Premier Smith are also embroiled in a rift over a proposed pipeline to the BC coast. Eby has been critical of Ottawa, saying the federal government is rewarding Alberta's, quote, bad behavior with the pipeline implementation agreement. CTV's Mason Despatie has more on what to expect from the Western Premiers meeting happening in Alberta.
A lot of those conversations will be between Premier Danielle Smith and BC Premier David Eby. The two are already at odds over the idea of a new pipeline from Alberta to BC's west coast. And now Smith arrives with new national attention over her new referendum question. Albertans will be asked this fall whether they'd like to stay in Canada or start the process towards a binding separation referendum. Smith says roughly 700,000 people signed either the stay or leave petitions and argues it's time to give Albertans a direct answer. But the questions drawing criticism from both sides of the debate. Smith defended the move this weekend on CTV Question Period, saying she'll campaign for Alberta to stay in Canada and promised not to move forward with separation if the Remain side wins.
Yes, I do. I will listen to the will of the people, and that's why I'm going to be advocating on that side. But it goes the other way as well. That if Albertans vote the other way, then we'll have to begin the legal process to get to a binding referendum.
Well, the official focus of this Kananaskis meeting is trade and interprovincial relations. The political fallout from the referendum question will at least dominate a part of that conversation. Back to you.
All right, that's CTV's Mason Despatie reporting from Calgary for us today. Okay, joining us now with more, Michael Gagan, political analyst. Nice to see you today, Michael.
Nice to be here.
Not a lot of details coming out of this expected itinerary in Kananaskis. Two huge topics certainly gathering the most attention right now. What do you expect the chatter will be about today and into tomorrow?
Well, I mean, the underlying chatter is, does Confederation work anymore? I mean, if we're going to hang together as a country, can we actually function as a country? And with David Eby continuing to play to his base by opposing pipelines, he's not doing anything to help those that want to see Canada remain one country, right? He's the biggest ally right now separatist forces in Alberta have with his posturing, which is driven by the fact that he's record low support in British Columbia, and so he is looking to shore up his base. And so, of course, he's saying no to pipelines, even as trainload after trainload filled with bitumen and products from Alberta are going through British Columbia on railroad tracks. So, they say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Well, I think the road to separation is paved by people politically posturing rather than get serious about statecraft. So there's going to be discussions about pipelines. With Eby's attitude, I don't see it going anywhere. And that's, like I say, a huge gift to the separatists in Alberta. The other issue is going to be trade talks. All the interprovincial trade barriers that has been going on since Confederation. That is something that different premiers at different times have tried to peck away at, but it remains a very, very difficult problem. Apparently, we can do free trade with other countries, but not so much internally.
Okay, as a Westerner that the push for separation, while most prominent in Alberta, is a movement that has garnered some support in Saskatchewan and Manitoba. We've heard terms like Wexit being tossed around in recent months, but you don't see an actual push for action in those provinces. So what do you expect the quiet conversations between the premiers, perhaps not David Eby, Premier Eby, will be with Premier Smith with respect to this proposal for a question on separation in the fall referendum?
Well, I think there's going to be from the other Western premiers, I think there's going to be some pressure on Premier Eby to find a way forward where Alberta can get its oil to natural gas to Tidewater, and to that extent. That will be useful. I think you'll even see the NDP Premier of Manitoba trying to persuade Eby to take a more reasoned and reasonable approach. But let's be clear here. If Alberta did eventually separate, you would see, I think, in fairly short order, the rest of the Western provinces seeking to confederate with Alberta because Alberta is an economic powerhouse. Eastern Canada is in economic decline. So, if Alberta succeeds, then the West will follow. If the Alberta referendum fails, then it'll continue to bubble below the surface. But the thing to keep in mind is that the Premier of Alberta is pro-Canada. She's actually bought both Prime Minister Carney and Eby and the other premiers more time to demonstrate to the good people of Alberta that it is worth staying in Canada. And so the onus is on them to deliver. She's bought them time. Don't waste it. And let's not waste it through politically posturing like I don't want oil going through pipelines. Instead, I want it going through on railroad tracks that are much more dangerous. So, let's get back to reality. Let's stop with the virtue signaling. Let's stop with the empty rhetoric. Let's get down to actually, making this country work economically, which it hasn't been doing for the last 10 years.
Okay, I take your point on that. But if we do want to get back to reality and we're looking at the numbers, the most recent poll done by Angus Reid just over the weekend in Alberta indicated that 67% of Albertans would choose to stay in the province if put that federation referendum question on the federation to them today. And if it was put more simply, even more of them, 60% to 67%, depending on how it was phrased. So people in Alberta, by and large, want to stay in the country today. So when it comes to political posturing, is there perhaps not a conversation to be had with Premier Smith about whether she's trying to satisfy a separatist base as opposed to the majority of the province, which, if you trust these numbers, want to remain a part of Canada?
Well, actually, what I think she's done is very shrewd. First of all, she has hundreds of thousands of Albertans that voted to say, we want to have a vote on whether or not we should separate, right? And so what she's done is she hasn't ignored those hundreds of thousands of Albertans, which would have been political suicide. Instead, what she said is, okay, because of this rather questionable court ruling, but because of the clear indication of these hundreds of thousands of Albertans, we are going to have a question this year on whether or not to move forward subsequently with a properly formatted independence referendum. Now, if those polling numbers hold, then yeah, that will be defeated, and there will be no subsequent vote for a binding vote for independence, right? So so if those numbers hold, but even if a majority of Albertans, and some of them may be doing this strategically as a bargaining thing, even if they vote later this year to subsequently have an independence referendum, that puts Alberta in an extremely strong bargaining position with the Prime Minister and with the other premiers. So, it's like I say, there's not really a lot of downside to proceeding ahead. There's huge political downside to doing nothing and just ignoring the will of the people. And like I say, let the people decide. If the numbers hold, we won't even get to the next stage. But all I can say is the more we continue to hobble Alberta, the stronger we're making the economic argument for the separatists. And that's a very, very dangerous thing to do.
Political analyst Michael Geoghegan. Michael, appreciate you being with us very much. Thank you for this.
Thank you.